was the dead of night when Emma first noticed the sky. Black clouds swirled like ink in water, blotting out the stars, and a distant rumble shook the ground beneath her feet. The air smelled heavy, like something old and dangerous was about to wake up. Emma had always been a fan of storms, but this one felt different, angry, almost alive. The forecast hadn't predicted anything like this. Yet here it was, a storm that seemed to be creeping in from nowhere, swallowing the night whole. She had rented a small cabin deep in the woods, hoping to escape the stress of city life. Just a weekend of peace and quiet, she thought. But now, with the storm coming, there was a growing sense of dread in her gut that she couldn't shake. The wind began to howl, rattling the windows of the cabin, and the trees bent as though they were bowing to some unseen force. Emma closed the book she had been reading and went to the window. A flash of lightning lit up the sky, illuminating the forest for a split second. In that moment, she saw something, a figure standing just at the edge of the tree line. It was tall, too tall to be a person, and its shape was distorted, like it was made of smoke. She blinked and it was gone, swallowed by the darkness once more. Her heart pounded as she backed away from the window, trying to convince herself it was just a trick of the light, a shadow cast by the trees. But the storm had a pulse now, a low hum that vibrated through the walls, and with each passing second, her cabin felt smaller, more isolated. The next flash of lightning was closer, the thunder crashing immediately after. And then, the lights went out. Emma stood in complete darkness, her breath quickening. She fumbled for her phone, using the faint glow of the screen to guide her through the room. She tried the light switches, but nothing worked. The power was completely gone. She decided to light the old lantern she had found in the cabin earlier, its warm glow casting eerie shadows on the walls. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from outside, like something heavy had hit the side of the cabin. Emma froze, straining to listen. The wind continued to howl, but there was something else now. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, crunching the wet leaves outside the door. Her mind raced, trying to come up with a rational explanation. Maybe an animal. But deep down, she knew it wasn't. There was an intelligence to those footsteps, something deliberate and menacing. She grabbed the lantern and inched toward the door, her heart pounding in her chest. Another flash of lightning illuminated the cabin, and for a brief moment, she saw it again. The same shadowy figure standing outside, closer this time. Its eyes, or what should have been eyes, glowing faintly in the darkness. Emma's breath hitched, and she stepped back, her mind screaming at her to lock the door. But when she reached for the lock, something slammed against the door from the outside, rattling the frame. The doorknob twisted slowly, and she watched in horror as it turned all the way, the door creaking open. She stumbled backward, dropping the lantern. It hit the floor with a dull thud, the flame flickering before going out. Complete darkness swallowed her again. The wind howled through the open door, carrying with it the unmistakable sound of whispering voices. They were faint, like a chorus of the dead, their words unintelligible, but filled with malice. Emma backed into the corner, her eyes straining to see. She could feel the presence now. Whatever it was had stepped inside. Her breath came in ragged gasps as she pressed herself against the wall, praying she would wake up from this nightmare. The figure moved closer, its shape barely visible in the dim light of the storm. It seemed to float above the ground, its body twisting unnaturally. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, as if they were trying to force their way into her mind. Emma squeezed her eyes shut, covering her ears, but the voices were inside her head now, filling her with a fear so profound she thought her heart might stop. And then, as quickly as it had started, everything went silent. The wind died down, the whispers vanished, and the oppressive weight that had been pressing on her chest lifted. Emma opened her eyes slowly, terrified of what she might see. But the figure was gone. The storm outside had calmed, the thunder now a distant rumble. Cautiously, Emma stood up, her legs shaking. She made her way to the door, peering out into the dark woods. Nothing. No movement, no shadowy figures, just the eerie quiet of the night. She slammed the door shut and locked it, her hands trembling. Whatever had been outside, it was gone, for now. But the fear lingered, a cold knot in her stomach. She knew deep down, that the storm had brought something with it. Something ancient, something malevolent, and she knew it would come back. As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, Emma made a decision. She would pack her things and leave the cabin as soon as the sun was fully up. Whatever had come with the storm, she didn't want to be around when it returned. But as she turned to gather her things, a soft whisper echoed through the room, so faint she almost didn't hear it. "Not yet." Emma froze, her blood turning to ice. The storm might have passed, but whatever had come with it was still here, and it wasn't done with her yet.
I never thought in a million years that anything truly horrific would ever happen to me. I'm an average person with a boring enough life that anything out of the ordinary was really out of the ordinary. This is why I was always okay with watching or listening to those creepypasta and true horror stories on YouTube. I still do watch them often, but after my own experience, these stories scared me in a whole new way. It was late at night, I'd say around 4 a.m., but I don't really know for sure, and everyone else in my house was asleep. My mother and both of my grandparents. For the past 2 months or so, we get at least one major thunderstorm per week, and it just so happened that this one decided to start earlier that night. Now, I always enjoy a good thunderstorm, especially at night when you can go sit by a window and just watch the lightning. But something about the wind of them always creeped me out. Maybe the fact that it could be soft or deafening and switch between the two almost instantly. But for some reason, wind has always given me huge creeps. Now, this night's thunderstorm was one of the worst we'd had in a long time. It sounded like rocks were hitting my window all night, but I was enjoying listening to it while I browsed Reddit, as I do. And all of a sudden, the power went out in the blink of an eye. This was kind of creepy, but I didn't really mind, because I had my data and a decent charge on my phone, so I continued browsing. After a little while, I started to get tired, so I figured it was time to shut my phone off and get some sleep. I placed it on the side table next to me and rolled over to go to sleep. I guess I passed out shortly after because I don't remember anything in between the rain hammering at my window and the eerie silence of a soft wind outside. I assume the rain stopped while I was asleep. I rolled over to get more comfortable because my side was hurting, and then I realized just how parched for water I was. It took a few minutes to try and fall back asleep again, but it didn't happen. My mouth was just too dry. I sat up, grabbed my phone, and turned on the flashlight so I could have a source of light to the kitchen to grab a glass of water and go back to bed. As I opened my bedroom door, I was smacked in the face with a blast of cold air. It was freezing in the living room. I quickly threw on a sweater and continued to the kitchen. As I was nearing it, I could hear the wind becoming louder and the temperature become colder. I reached the kitchen and walked in, grabbed a glass from the cupboard, and started to fill it with water from the tap. I took a quick glance around the kitchen and noticed something weird. The door to the patio was left open. Naturally, I was weirded out by this and a little scared, thinking of how that could happen. I ended up rationalizing to myself that my grandfather must have left it open earlier that night and just forgot about it. I walked over to the sliding door, glanced over my shoulder out of paranoia, and slid it shut and locked it. I fast walked back to my room just in case. I opened my door and closed it behind me, and then laid back down in bed, my glass of water on my side table and flashlight still in hand. I was able to calm myself down slightly, enough to turn off the flashlight and try to get some shut-eye. Something inside of me wasn't letting me forget the possibility that there might be someone in my house. I got back out of bed again and slid my chair from my desk to my door in an attempt to keep someone out. I then checked the closet again, just in case. I laid back down again and kept my flashlight on as a sort of nightlight this time. Then, the most disturbing thing that's ever happened to me occurred. I felt a slight bump come from under my bed, accompanied by a creak of the bed springs. I then realized I hadn't checked under my bed like an idiot. It felt like I was gonna vomit, and I leaned off the side of my bed and peered underneath. I saw the disturbing sight of an extremely unhealthily skinny woman with bloodshot eyes and yellow teeth staring back at me. She was smiling an ungodly grin that I still can't get out of my head. She stared at me for at least 3 seconds while I was still trying to process what I was seeing before she, I swear to God, cackled like a fucking witch. At this point, my whole brain was screaming nope, and I leapt out of my bed towards my door, moved the chair as fast as possible, and sprinted down the hall to my grandparents' room. I banged on the door as loud as I could while calling for my grandfather. He was out within seconds and he had a gun in his hand, something he had never even mentioned having in the house. We ran to my room, him in front of my grandmother and I, and we just barely caught a glimpse of a white figure running away from the bedroom window. My grandfather took a shot, presuming as a warning to tell them to never come back. We didn't end up calling the police because we figured they wouldn't be able to do anything since we don't have security cameras or have any idea who she even was. All I can guess was that this woman was dangerously ill and saw my bedroom light on before the power went out. I have no idea what her intentions were or if she even knew what she was doing. We're getting the windows and doors in the house installed with locks sometime the next week just for safety. And all I can say is, even if you live in a safe area or a trusted community, sometime the next week just for safety. And all I can say is, even if you live in a safe area or a trusted community, bad things still can and do happen. You always have to take precautions against such things.